The rain slashed against the cobblestones, each drop a tiny explosion in the dark, as I crouched behind a crumbling statue in the palace gardens. My heart pounded like a war drum, loud enough to betray me to the guards sweeping their lanterns through the mist. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this gilded cage of a kingdom. Not in these velvet shadows where the air smelled of roses and treason. My name's Kale, a nobody from the lower wards, a thief with quick hands and a quicker mouth. But tonight, I was someone else entirely. Lord Elias Varn, a nobleman with a forged crest and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The plan was simple. Sneak into the royal ball, lift the Star of Orin from the prince's private chambers, and vanish before anyone noticed the stench of my lies. Easy, right? Except the crown prince, Eric Valen, was staring at me from across the ballroom, his eyes like twin flames in the candlelight, and I swear he knew. He knew I wasn't who I said I was. And worse, he thought I was something far more dangerous, his fated mate. The ballroom was a fever dream of gold and crystal, chandeliers dripping light like honey over silk gowns and polished boots. I adjusted the stolen sapphire cufflinks, my fingers twitching with the urge to pocket something, anything, to calm the nerves clawing my gut. The music swelled, a violin's wail curling through the air, and I forced myself to move, gliding through the crowd like I belonged. My forged invitation had gotten me past the gates, but it wouldn't save me if Eric's gaze pinned me any longer. He stood by the throne, tall and lean, his black hair falling in soft waves over a silver circlet. His eyes, a storm gray that seemed to pierce the soul, hadn't left me since I'd stepped into the room. I flashed him a smile, the kind I'd practiced in broken mirrors back home, all charm and no truth. He didn't smile back. Instead, he tilted his head, like a wolf catching a scent, and my stomach dropped. I needed a distraction, fast. Slipping toward the refreshment table, I brushed past a noblewoman in a peacock feather gown, her perfume sharp enough to make my eyes water. I lifted a glass of sparkling wine, letting the bubbles fizz against my lips, and scanned the room for an exit. The Star of Orin was upstairs, locked in a velvet-lined case, according to my contact in the Thieves' Guild. Get in, get out, get paid. That was the deal. But Eric was moving now, cutting through the crowd like a blade, his crimson cloak billowing behind him. My pulse spiked. I turned, pretending to admire a tapestry of a stag hunt, when a hand warm, firm, and entirely too confident, closed around my wrist. Lord Elias, he said, his voice low, like the rumble of thunder before a storm. You're a difficult man to find. I froze, every instinct screaming to bolt, but his grip was a velvet cage. Up close, he was even more unnerving. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could carve marble, and those eyes, God, those eyes that seemed to see straight through my disguise. Your Highness, I managed, my voice steady despite the sweat prickling my spine. I didn't realize I was being sought. He didn't let go. His thumb brushed the inside of my wrist, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through me, like lightning kissing the earth. You're not what you seem, he said, and my heart stopped. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear, carrying the faint scent of cedar and wine. But I know what you are to me. I laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that echoed too loudly in my own ears. And what's that, exactly? I asked, tugging my wrist free and stepping back, my boots clicking against the marble floor. The music shifted, a slower waltz, and couples began to pair off, their laughter a soft hum beneath the tension coiling between us. Eric's lips curved, not quite a smile, but something darker, hungrier. Dance with me, he said, not a question but a command, his hand already extended. My mind raced. Refusing a prince was a death sentence, or at least a one-way ticket to the dungeons. But dancing meant being close, too close, where he could feel the cheap stitching of my stolen jacket or notice the calluses on my thief's hands. I hesitated, and his eyes softened, just for a moment, like clouds parting to reveal a glimpse of sky. Please, he added quieter. And damn if that word didn't hit me like a punch. I took his hand, my fingers trembling slightly as they slid into his. The crowd parted as he led me to the center of the floor, the violin's mournful cry wrapping around us like a shroud. His hand settled on my waist, warm through the thin fabric, and I fought the urge to flinch. "You're nervous," he murmured, guiding me into the first steps of the waltz. Our bodies moved in sync too easily, like we'd done this 1,000 times before. "Why is that, Elias?" "I'm not used to dancing with royalty," I said, forcing a grin. His hand tightened on mine, and I caught the flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or suspicion. The air between us crackled, heavy with unspoken questions. I needed to redirect him to keep him from peeling back my lies. "So, Your Highness, what's it like being the kingdom's golden boy? Must be exhausting. Everyone watching your every move." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through me. "You have no idea." His gaze dropped to my lips, just for a second, and my breath caught. This was bad. Very bad. I was here to steal, not to feel whatever this was. Heat, pull, a dangerous kind of gravity. "But you," he continued, his voice softer now, "you're different. You don't look at me like I'm a prize to be won." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Maybe I'm just not impressed." I shot back, hoping to throw him off. It didn't work. His smile widened, and he spun me, his grip sure and steady, the room blurring into streaks of gold and shadow. "Then why do I feel like I've known you forever?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, and my heart stuttered. The words hit too close, too raw, like he'd plucked a string deep inside me I didn't know existed. I opened my mouth to deflect, to lie, but then I saw her, Lyra, my partner in the Thieves' Guild, slipping through the crowd in a servant's uniform. Her eyes met mine, sharp and urgent, and she gave a subtle nod toward the staircase. The signal. Time to move. "I need some air," I said abruptly, pulling away from Eric. His hand lingered on mine, reluctant, and for a split second, I thought he wouldn't let go. But he did, his expression unreadable, and I slipped into the crowd, my pulse racing like a runaway horse. The staircase loomed ahead, spiraling up to the prince's chambers. I was almost there when a voice, sharp, familiar, and dripping with venom, stopped me cold. "Kale?" It hissed from the shadows. I turned, and there was Tobin, my old mentor from the guild, his scarred face half hidden by a hood. He wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody was. "You think you can pull this off without me?" he sneered, stepping closer, his breath sour with cheap ale. "The star's mine. You're just the bait." My stomach twisted. Tobin was a loose cannon, a blade that cut both ways. If he was here, the plan was already unraveling. "Walk away," I whispered, my voice low and tight. "This isn't your score." He laughed, a jagged sound that grated against my nerves. "You're in over your head, kid. That prince? He's not just smitten. He's obsessed. And when he finds out you're a fraud, you're dead." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin, and I yanked free, my heart hammering. The music swelled behind us, masking our voices, but I could feel Eric's eyes on me again, burning from across the room. I had seconds to decide. Stick to the plan and risk Tobin blowing my cover, or abort and lose everything, the star, the payout, my shot at freedom. The rain outside thundered harder, a roar that matched the chaos in my chest. I glanced at Lyra, now hovering near the staircase, her eyes wide with warning. Then I looked back at Eric, still watching, his expression a mix of longing and something darker, something that made my skin prickle. I was a thief, not a hero. But tonight, I was playing a role, and the curtain was far from falling. The staircase spiraled upward like a coiled snake, each step creaking under my boots as I climbed, the air growing colder, heavier, with every floor. My breath came in short, sharp bursts, the kind that fogged in the chill of the palace's upper halls. Tobin's words clung to me like damp cloth. "You're just the bait." And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap, not just stealing from one. Lyra was behind me, her servant's apron rustling faintly, her eyes darting to every shadow. "Move faster," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of the ballroom below. "We've got 10 minutes before the guard rotation." I nodded, my fingers brushing the lockpicks hidden in my sleeve. The prince's chambers were at the end of the corridor, behind a door carved with wolves and stars, the kind of ostentatious art that screamed wealth. My hands were steady, but my mind was a storm. Eric's touch still lingered on my waist, his words, "I feel like I've known you forever," echoing in my skull. It was nonsense, some royal delusion, but the way he'd looked at me, like I was the only person in a room of hundreds, had cracked something open inside me, something I couldn't afford to feel. Lyra nudged me, her elbow sharp against my ribs. "Focus, Kale. You're acting like a lovesick puppy, not a thief." Her tone was half teasing, half worried, and I shot her a glare. She was right, though. I was slipping, and Tobin's presence only made it worse. If he was here, the guild was playing a deeper game, one I hadn't been told about. The Star of Orin wasn't just a jewel. It was a symbol, a relic said to hold the kingdom's fate. Stealing it was supposed to be my ticket out of the lower wards, but now it felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The door loomed ahead, its wolf carvings seeming to snarl in the torchlight. I knelt, pulling out my lockpicks, the metal cool against my fingers. The lock was intricate, a maze of tumblers that clicked and resisted under my touch. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and I could hear Lyra's shallow breaths behind me, her shadow flickering as she kept watch. "Hurry," she whispered, her voice tight. "I hear footsteps." My heart lurched, but my hands stayed steady. Click, click. The final tumbler gave way, and the door swung open with a soft groan, revealing a room that smelled of leather and cedar, lit by a single lantern casting long shadows across velvet drapes and a massive four-poster bed. The Star of Orin sat on a pedestal in the corner, a fist-sized sapphire glowing faintly, like it held a piece of the night sky. I stepped forward, my boots silent on the thick rug, when a voice, low, dangerous, and far too familiar, cut through the silence. "Elias?" Eric said, stepping out from behind a tapestry like a goddamn ghost. My stomach plummeted. He was still in his crimson cloak, but the circlet was gone. His hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Or should I say Kale? My blood turned to ice. Lyra gasped behind me, her hand flying to the dagger hidden under her apron. I held up a hand, stopping her, my mind racing for a lie, an excuse, anything to salvage this. "Your Highness," I started, my voice smoother than I felt. "I can explain." "Don't," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut. He stepped closer, and I backed up instinctively, my hip bumping the pedestal. The star wobbled, and I caught it before it fell, the gem cold and heavy in my hand. Eric's eyes flicked to it, then back to me, and something flickered in his expression, hurt, maybe, or betrayal. "I knew you weren't a lord," he said, his voice quieter now, almost broken. "But I didn't think you'd steal from me." The words hit harder than they should have. I gripped the star tighter, my knuckles whitening. "You don't know me?" I said, forcing steel into my voice. "You don't get to act like I owe you anything." "Don't I?" He shot back, closing the distance between us. He was too close now, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar on his skin, hear the soft catch in his breath. "I felt it, Kale, the moment I saw you, like my soul recognized yours." His hand reached out, hovering near my cheek, and I flinched, not because I was scared, but because I wanted him to touch me, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. Lyra cleared her throat, breaking the spell. "Kale, we need to go. Now." Her voice was urgent, and I heard it then, the clank of armor in the corridor, the guards getting closer. Eric's eyes didn't leave mine, but his jaw tightened, like he was fighting some internal war. "Go," he said suddenly, stepping back. "Take the star. But this isn't over." I I stared at him, my mind blank. Was he letting us go? Lyra grabbed my arm, yanking me toward a side door that led to a servant's passage. I stuffed the star into my jacket, my hands shaking, and followed her, but not before glancing back at Eric. He stood there, alone in the flickering light, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning with something I couldn't name. The passage was narrow, damp, the air thick with mildew. Lyra moved like a shadow, her steps quick and silent, but I was slower, my thoughts tangled. Why had he let us go? And how the hell did he know my name? We emerged into a courtyard, the rain soaking us instantly, plastering my hair to my face. Lyra spun on me, her eyes blazing. What was that, Kale? You froze up there. And the prince? God, he's in love with you or something. He's not. I snapped, but my voice lacked conviction. My chest ached, like something was clawing its way out. I pulled the star from my jacket, its glow dim in the rain, and shoved it into Lyra's hands. Take it to the guild. I need to deal with Tobin. Her eyes widened. You're not coming? Kale, this is suicide. I'll meet you at the safe house, I said, cutting her off. Go. She hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the storm. I turned back toward the palace, my boots sinking into the mud. Tobin was still out there, and if he was double-crossing me, I needed to know why. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just Tobin pulling me back. It was Eric. His words, his eyes, the way he'd looked at me like I was more than a thief, more than a lie. The palace loomed through the rain, its spires like jagged teeth against the sky. I slipped back inside through a servant's entrance, the corridors quieter now, the ball winding down. My heart pounded as I moved, sticking to the shadows, until I heard voices, low, heated, coming from a side chamber. I pressed myself against the wall, peering through a crack in the door. Tobin was there, his hood thrown back, arguing with a woman I didn't recognize. She was older, her hair streaked with silver, her voice sharp and commanding. The prince must not bond with him, she said, her words clipped. If he claims his fated mate, the prophecy shifts. The kingdom falls. Tobin sneered. Then we kill the thief. Problem solved. My breath caught, my hand tightening on the dagger at my belt. Prophecy. Fated mate. This was bigger than a jewel heist, bigger than anything I'd signed up for. And Eric, he was at the center of it, whether he knew it or not. The air in the corridor felt like a vice, squeezing my chest as I backed away from the door. Tobin's words echoing in my skull. Kill the thief. My boots scraped against the stone, a faint sound swallowed by the distant clink of glasses from the ballroom below. The woman's voice, cold and precise, lingered like a blade pressed to my throat. Prophecy. Fated mate. The kingdom's fate tied to Eric and me? It was insane. A fever dream spun from too much wine and too little sleep. I was Kale, a lower ward's rat who picked pockets and dodged guards. Not some cosmic key to a kingdom's destiny. But Eric's eyes, the way they'd burned into mine, told a different story, one I wasn't ready to read. I needed to move. The guards would be circling back soon, their lanterns cutting through the dark like hounds on a scent. My hand brushed the dagger at my hip, its weight a small comfort as I slipped down a side passage, the air damp and heavy with the scent of old stone. Tobin was a problem, but this woman, whoever she was worse. She wasn't Guild. Guild didn't talk about prophecies or fated mates. They talked about coin and survival. She was something else, something bigger, and I was caught in her web. The passage spit me out near the gardens, where the rain had softened to a drizzle, mist curling like ghosts around the rose bushes. I crouched behind a hedge, my breath shallow, scanning for Tobin. He'd always been a snake, but turning on me like this? That was personal. I'd been his apprentice once, back when I was a scrawny kid with nothing but quick fingers and a quicker temper. He'd taught me how to slip a lock, how to smile while lying through my teeth. But he'd also taught me never to trust anyone, especially him. A twig snapped, and I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunched through the gravel. I peered through the leaves, expecting Tobin's scarred sneer, but it was Eric. He stood in the moonlight, his crimson cloak dark with rain, his expression unreadable but his posture tense, like a bowstring pulled taut. He was alone, no guards, no retinue, just him and the night and the weight of whatever he was carrying. "Kale," he called softly, his voice cutting through the drizzle like a bell. "I know you're here." My stomach twisted. How did he keep finding me? I stayed still, my breath held, but his eyes scanned the garden with a precision that made my skin crawl. He wasn't guessing, he knew. I stepped out, my hands raised, the dagger still sheathed. "What do you want, Eric?" I asked, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. The rain clung to my lashes, blurring him into a watercolor of shadow and light. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed the distance between us, his boots silent on the wet grass, and stopped just close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "Why did you come back?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. "You had the star. You could have run." I swallowed, my throat tight. The truth was a tangle I couldn't unravel. Not without admitting things I wasn't ready to face. "Unfinished business," I said, dodging his gaze. The air smelled of wet earth and roses, and I focused on that, on anything but the way his presence pulled at me, like a tide dragging me under. "Business?" he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. He stepped closer, and I backed up, my shoulders brushing the hedge. "Is that all this is to you? A job?" His voice cracked, just slightly, and it hit me like a stone to the chest. He wasn't just angry, he was hurt, and God help me, I cared. Before I could answer, a shadow moved behind him, swift and silent. Tobin. His blade gleamed in the moonlight, aimed for Eric's back. I didn't think. I lunged, shoving Eric aside and tackling Tobin to the ground. We hit the gravel hard, pain shooting through my shoulder as his dagger grazed my arm. A hot sting that made me hiss. "You little rat," Tobin snarled, his breath sour as he pinned me, his weight crushing the air from my lungs. I drove my knee into his gut, twisting free and scrambling to my feet, my dagger now in hand. Eric was on his feet too, his own blade drawn, a short sword that looked like it had seen blood before. "Stay back." I snapped at him, my eyes locked on Tobin. The older man laughed, wiping blood from his lip, his scar twisting his face into something monstrous. "You're protecting him?" Tobin spat, circling me. "You're dumber than I thought, Kale. He's a mark, nothing more. And you?" He lunged, and I dodged, the blade whistling past my ear. "You're dead weight." Eric moved faster than I expected, his sword clashing against Tobin's dagger with a spark that lit the dark. "Enough," he growled, his voice a low roar that sent a shiver down my spine. Tobin staggered back, but he was grinning, like he'd already won. "Ask your prince about the prophecy," Tobin said, his eyes glinting as he glanced at me. "Ask him why he's so desperate to keep you close." He darted into the shadows before Eric could strike again, leaving us alone in the dripping quiet. I turned to Eric, my chest heaving, blood trickling down my arm and mixing with the rain. "What the hell was he talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and something else. Fear, maybe, or the weight of too many lies. Eric sheathed his sword, his hands trembling slightly, and for the first time he looked lost. "There's a prophecy," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "It says my fated mate will either save the kingdom or destroy it." He met my eyes, and the raw vulnerability there made my heart ache. "When I saw you tonight, I felt it. The bond. It's you, Kale. I don't know how, but it's you." I laughed, a harsh, broken sound that echoed in the empty garden. "You're insane?" I said, stepping back, my boots slipping on the wet gravel. "I'm a thief, Eric. A liar. I'm not your destiny. I'm nobody." "You're wrong," he said, his voice fierce now, his hand reaching for mine. I pulled away, my chest tight, the rain cold against my skin. "I've spent my life waiting for you, and now you're here and you're—" He stopped, his breath hitching, And I saw it then, the weight he carried, the loneliness of a prince who was more myth than man. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted to scream at him for making me feel things I had no right to feel. Instead, I turned and fled, my boots pounding through the mud, the prophecy and Tobin's betrayal chasing me into the night. The safe house was a crumbling shack on the edge of the lower wards, its walls stained with soot and secrets. I stumbled inside, my arm throbbing where Tobin's blade had kissed it, the rain still dripping from my hair. Lyra was there, pacing, the star of Orin glowing faintly on the table between us. "You're late," she snapped, her eyes narrowing at the blood soaking my sleeve. "And you're hurt. What happened?" I sank onto a rickety chair, my breath ragged. "Tobin," I said, the name bitter on my tongue. "He's working with someone, a woman. They're after more than the star." "And Eric?" I trailed off, my chest tightening at the memory of his voice. His eyes, the way he'd said "it's you" like it was a prayer and a curse. Lyra's face softened, just for a moment, before she crossed her arms. "The prince? Kale, you're in too deep. We need to deliver the star and get out of this city before the guild turns on us both." She was right, but the words felt hollow. I wasn't just running from Tobin or the guild. I was running from Eric, from the pull in my chest that grew stronger every time I thought of him. Before I could answer, the door burst open, and Eric stood there, rain-soaked and furious, his sword still at his hip. Lyra grabbed her dagger, but I waved her off, my heart lurching. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I followed you," he said, his eyes locked on mine, ignoring Lyra entirely. "I'm not letting you disappear, Kale. Not now." His voice cracked, and the sound was a knife to my gut. He stepped inside, the door creaking shut behind him, and the air in the room grew thick, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "You need to leave," I said, standing, my hands clenched. "This isn't your world, Eric. You're a prince. I'm a thief. There's no prophecy, no bond, just a con gone wrong." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "You don't believe that. I saw it in your eyes when we danced, when you saved me in the garden. You feel it too." He stepped closer, and I didn't back away this time. Couldn't, my body betraying me as his hand brushed my cheek, his touch warm against my cold skin. "I don't care who you were before. I care who you are now." Lyra cleared her throat, her voice sharp. "This is sweet, but we're sitting on a stolen relic with half the city's guards probably hunting us. Kale, make a choice." I looked at Eric, his face lit by the flickering lantern, his eyes pleading, and something inside me broke. I spent my life running, lying, surviving. But with him, I wanted to stop, to be seen, to be more than the sum of my scams. "I can't be what you want," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm not a hero. I'm not your mate." "You're enough," he said, his voice fierce, and then he kissed me. It was sudden, desperate, his lips warm and urgent against mine, tasting of rain and cedar and something I couldn't name. I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his cloak, the world narrowing to the heat of his mouth, the thud of his heart against mine. For a moment I wasn't a thief, wasn't a liar, just Kale, wanted, needed, seen. The door exploded inward, splintering wood across the floor. Tobin stood there, flanked by 2 guild enforcers, their blades drawn. Behind them was the woman from the palace, her silver-streaked hair gleaming in the dim light. "Enough of this," she said, her voice cold as winter. "The thief dies. The prophecy ends." Eric pulled me behind him, his sword flashing as he faced them. "You'll have to go through me," he growled, and my heart stuttered at the raw protectiveness in his voice. Lyra moved to my side, her dagger ready, and I drew mine, the weight familiar but heavier now, like it carried the cost of every choice I'd made. The fight was chaos, blades clashing, shouts echoing, the table overturning with a crash that sent the star of orange skittering across the floor. I ducked a swing from an enforcer, my dagger slicing his arm, but Tobin was on me, his blade aimed for my chest. Eric tackled him, their bodies hitting the ground with a thud, and I saw the woman raise a crossbow, her eyes locked on Eric. "No!" I shouted, lunging. The bolt fired, grazing my shoulder as I shoved Eric out of the way. Pain seared through me, hot and blinding, but I stayed on my feet, my vision swimming. The woman reloaded, her face calm, almost serene, as she aimed again. Lyra threw her dagger, catching the woman's hand, and the crossbow clattered to the ground. Eric pinned Tobin, his sword at the man's throat, but the woman laughed, a chilling sound that cut through the chaos. "You can't stop it," she said. "The prophecy will claim you both." She fled, vanishing into the night, leaving her enforcers to fall under Eric's blade. The room went quiet, save for our ragged breaths and the drip of rain through the broken door. Eric dropped his sword, rushing to me, his hands gentle as they checked my wounds. "You're hurt," he said, his voice thick with fear. "I'm fine," I lied, swaying slightly. Lyra grabbed the star, stuffing it into her satchel, her eyes wide with panic. "We need to move," she said, but Eric's arms were around me now, steadying me, his warmth anchoring me to the moment. "I'm not losing you," he whispered, his forehead pressed to mine, and I believed him. For the first time, I believed I could be more than a thief, more than a lie. The prophecy, the star, the guild, they could wait. In that moment, it was just us, two broken souls finding each other in the wreckage. We fled the city that night, the three of us, the star hidden in Lyra's bag, the prophecy a shadow we couldn't outrun. But as we slipped into the forest, Eric's hand in mine, I felt something new, hope, fragile but fierce, like a spark in the dark. I wasn't his fated mate, not yet, maybe not ever. But I was his and he was mine, and that was enough to fight for. The kingdom might fall, but we'd rise, together, rewriting our own story. One where a thief could be a hero, and a prince could be a home.